Welcome to Five Questions. I am your host, Kevin King. Each episode on Five Questions, we take a developer, usually someone more in the indie scene, and learn about what inspires their creativity and what led them to make the choices they made in designing their games. With me this week, I have Corey Nolan. Corey is the co-chair of the International Game Developers Association in Phoenix and a member of Indie House, Arizona. You can find Corey's games online at Corey Nolan. That's CoreyNolan.com. Recently, she's built a game called Skinnier for last January's Global Game Jam. And before that, she released a game that I personally found quite fascinating, was Growing, a side-scrolling point-and-click, kind of almost like a God game in some ways, or has those elements. At least to me, they did.
I have not used any of those words to describe it.
well, all right.
It's good. I like it.
I know. Okay, sorry. I thought I was offending you. But
I call it an experimental puzzle game, but
yeah. Well, the God part was to me was the limited resources while building essentially a garden over your child thing. But I want to welcome Corey. Welcome to Five Questions.
Oh,
how are
sorry.
you? How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. You ready to start this thing?
I am.
All right. So, like I said, a big reason why I recommended Growing on One More Turn, the podcast I host, was that there was like seemingly, I felt like in researching that, I felt like there was no games about mothers or parents. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's not the only reason I picked it. I really enjoyed it. But other than, in my experience, other than a few references to mothers in games like, Mother or Genova in like a Final Fantasy, or, Yoshi acting as the Mario Brothers parents on Yoshi Islands, there's a few games that kind of explore a positive mother-child relationship or even a positive parent-child relationship. And I'm curious, first, what games or really any media did you look to for inspiration to create it? And how did you come up with the concept?
Yeah, so first of all, I agree with your assessment. I really can't think of any other mother games that I know that are, at least not in the AAA space, that are out there. Yoshi is an interesting character. But the inspiration for my game came from actually a game jam we were holding, which just to make people aware of that, a game jam is basically you set aside some amount of time and work on a game for that time period. So usually we hold game jams over weekends, and you have 48 hours to make a game or as much of one as you possibly can. So a couple of years ago, we hosted a game jam that took place over Mother's Day weekend. So we decided to make the theme for the game jam motherhood. And the way the theme works is that you basically have to structure your game around that theme in some way. So you can either do it directly. For me, I made the game about motherhood and made it a gift to my mom. Other people chose to take it a little more abstract or take it in other ways, but basically everyone who was at that game jam made games about motherhood in some way. And there was another game that came out of it that actually achieved some pretty good success, which was Offspring Fling by Kyle Pulver. So that game you actually play as a mother who throws her children in order to solve puzzles. So it's a puzzle platformer. It's not as brutal as it sounds. It's actually really cute. The mother is like this little like Pikachu meets Kirby creature. But so basically everyone at that game jam worked on a game about motherhood, and it was just a very interesting like array of games to come out of it. I think Growing and Offspring Fling were the only two that really went on to get released. Offspring Fling actually, they both got released about the same time, which is about 2 years later. So I knew I wanted to make a gift for my mom, and I knew I wanted it to be about sort of in an abstract way about my relationship to her, um, kind of understanding how hard it is of a task to raise kids in retrospect, and just kind of wanting to get the message across to her that I appreciate that um, in a way other than words.
And
The other thing,
how did
oh,
she
sorry.
take it? I'm curious how she took it. I read it on your blog, but I'm curious how she took it.
She really liked it, and actually, so my mom doesn't really play games. She used to back when we were kids, but she has not played in a long time, and she always very much supported like me being a game developer, but she wouldn't play like when I was making like small flash games and stuff. She wasn't picking them up and being like, "Oh man, I beat level 12! Like that was awesome." So I kind of wanted to make a game that was for her specifically, and yeah, she picked it up and immediately like knew how to play it, understood everything that was going on, including what the plants actually meant, which in all of the playtesting I've done, there's only been one other person who's actually picked up on that like immediately. So to see my mom just like understand everything I was going for right away was a really, really big deal for me. She was so grateful for it, and yeah, just
That's,
it was already a huge success.
well,
Um,
the kind of the the how the game comes across, the at least when I in my playthrough is I almost contrasted it with a lot of other games I play, more AAA stuff, which have that dark brown tone, and well, yours, growing, was a brighter style. It's very stark. It's very like the colors are really like in there. There's some soft edges on the design of the characters, and it has this kind of uh, uh, children's book kind of feel to it. And again, and like a children's book, it's very positive. It's very affirming, and it fits. The style fits that kind of messaging. The only dark elements are a couple scenes of like inclement weather, I think, and and some weeds that propagate the garden once in a while. I'm curious what made you want to pursue those happier, more positive elements, and what made you want to pursue a game about. It sounds like, I mean, with your explanation of your mother, but it sounds like you wanted to pursue something about specifically a parent-child relationship.
yeah. So the childlike style you mentioned is actually kind of a happy accident. Um, I'm not a very good artist, still working on that. So the abstract, like cell shaded style was very easy for me to emulate starting out. Um, so things like the characters in the game don't have faces, and that way I don't have to draw a whole bunch of facial expressions. Um, the art is kind of like more blobby and therefore like a little easier to draw. Like I didn't have to do details, although some of the plants get pretty detailed, but that's kind of just part of the draw of growing them over time, or the what do you call it? Like what makes it more fun to see them grow
Yeah.
up. Um, I really love color, so I think my games just naturally turn out a little more colorful when I'm in charge of the art. Uh, I just go crazy. If you look at the final art of the game character, which I have up on my site, among other places, it's just he's very colorful, or she. It's gender neutral, but just a very like every color in the spectrum, kind of like over the top, rainbowy look. And yeah, for the darker things, I mean, the weeds in the game are like you want to get rid of those, and um, oh, hold on a sec.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Here, well, I'll just pause for a second, then I can cut it.
Okay.
Okay, we're good. So
I'll start from
yeah, so yes, let me ask. I guess I'll follow up. So yeah, the darker elements, you kind of you want to eliminate those essentially. So it's like
Yeah, so the weeds are kind of just they'll take over the garden if you let them, but basically I just wanted to to make it obvious that you wanted to get rid of them right away. Um, it's interesting that the inclement weather, I think the winter part gets taken as a negative. I actually didn't mean for that to happen. I just think that seasons tend to map pretty well to phases of life. So I kind of like the idea of as your character gains points, you kind of go through the seasons like you're growing up a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, it was a mixture of it was an art style that was very accessible to me, and I love colors. So
Well, yeah, it's very pretty. I mean, I had childlike glee playing it.
thank
Honestly,
you.
I flash back to my own, days in the schoolyard or days in the play yard with my family. So, but you also, speaking of growing being a game jam game, another game jam game you also built is called Skinnier. Came out I believe last January, if I'm correct.
Yep.
And while you have growing with dealing with such affirmation in these very much how one person can affect somebody else in a positive way, Skinnier is a little more introverted in a way, and it deals with someone's issues of anorexia from this very first person viewpoint, and specifically how you playing as them start to feel it. And I'm curious, where did that idea emerge from, and what made you want to tell that type of story in first person? And well, yeah. Yeah. So where did the idea come from? What made you kind of want to put it in first person view?
Um, so the first of all, Skinnier was made at the Global Game Jam for this past year, 2014, and the theme for that was actually a whole phrase. It's we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. Which usually a theme is like a word or two, so that was kind of interesting as it was. But I was working with my two friends, Renee Naho and her boyfriend Will, and Will's another programmer, and Renee is a really good 3D artist. So together we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do, and originally we were going to do something kind of lighter and just more fun. But then when we got that theme, we sort of started thinking of darker things like self-image and like body issues, and all of it just seemed to lead to we want to make this game where you're surrounded by only the things that you kind of perceive. So the character in that game never sees themselves directly, which just a first-person perspective led to that pretty well. The only time you can see yourself is as a reflection in the mirror. And
When you look down, I notice when you look down, you can see your body. That's about it.
oh yeah, we actually intended to take that out too. It's just game jams. You don't always get to these things. But yeah, the only way you can actually like full on see yourself is through the mirror. And the other thing is the thing we were more taking that sentence to mean was like the interactions are very one-sided. You kind of internalize them yourself, and you don't really.
Yeah, I noticed that. The dialogue in those comes off as mostly, if you were just reading it normally and you weren't in a game called Skinnier, it would be pretty benign conversations. It's pretty benign phrases like, "Oh, are you going to eat that?" or everything on this menu looks so big portioned. Yet when you're playing the game, I mean, at least I felt it as the player, you start to feel like these dates are coming from like this place of pettiness. It sounds like that was intentional. I mean, did you make these? You tried to make these dates essentially these. For those who don't know, you go on blind dates in the game, and so was that your intention to kind of make these dates essentially blank slates with these middle of the road talking points, and sort of how important was that to kind of establish this benign dialogue to sort of make it for the player, the main character, to be the one with the skewed viewpoint or the misinterpretation of that?
Yeah. So the idea is that obviously, if you're speaking to someone, I mean, it's kind of a poke at the old school RPGs where you just, go up to someone and press A and they tell you their life story. But the idea of it is really just that it's like a condensed conversation. Like, presumably you guys, you talked back and forth, but this is everything the character like internalizes, and like when you're reflecting on that date at the end of the day, like that's what you're thinking of. We were supposed to have more than one scenario in there actually, but the dialogue turned out to be pretty extremely hard to write for that reason. It's supposed to be able to read as like not really, like you said, benign, like not harmful or otherwise, but as you start to go through the game, you gradually lose. You start to become like just more wary, I guess. Like you lose your self-esteem, and basically the dialogue becomes paired with these thoughts that you're kind of projecting onto the character. So every once in a while you'll see thought bubbles appear over the character's head, and those are actually like really harmful, and it's how you're reading that dialogue. So you start to like project this really harmful state onto these things that by themselves wouldn't sound that bad.
Right.
And it's kind of just like seeing your entire life as you are,
Yeah.
and not as people put it.
You have this, like I said, you have these kind of two very different stylistic games in Growing and in Skinnier. And I'm browsing your catalog, and you seem to want to jump between styles and genres pretty readily. You have, an RPG social media game. You have this first-person viewpoint game. This point-and-click adventure in Growing. I think you had like a music game in Glom. I was wondering if there was any one genre or game style that you would like to, really like to build, and how do you choose which style you'll build in for your next game?
Yeah, actually, that's interesting. I hadn't really considered the wide amount of genres represented there. Usually, when I'm thinking about like smaller games that I do, like Growing or Skinnier, I'm not really thinking of a specific genre. I guess if I had to call them anything, I'd probably call them like adventure or experimental. So when I'm jumping in for a reason other than gameplay, I guess I usually just go with whatever makes sense. Like I was saying, the first person for Skinnier made a lot of sense. Kind of the puzzle elements to Growing were what made it compelling to me, and also what I thought my mom might like.
Yeah, it sounds like you like grow from you start with the concept and build out from there rather than fit something to fit a certain genre.
Yeah. The social media game you were mentioning, I think that's Legend of Mark. That's actually just because I got really obsessed with Markov chains and how to create them from your own personal data, and that basically became a prototype that spiraled way out of control. So that wasn't meant to be an RPG either. I just wanted to practice pixel art.
It looked nice. I don't know. I like the style of it.
Thanks. Coming soon. As soon as I get the main character animating, I'll put it up there. Yeah. So in terms of games I like to play, I think by far my favorite is turn-based strategy games, both both board and video games. Play those a lot, and I would really like to make some more things in the turn-based strategy genre. Well, I released a turn-based card game way back in the day. I don't think it's even still around on the internet, but I basically haven't delved into it because there's a lot of systems I need to make first.
Oh, nice. That's my cat talking. She sounds like she's a fan. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, what's that's it, Corey. I mean, that's 5 questions. I'm curious, what's next for Corey Nolan? What's next for you? And where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website that you mentioned was a pretty good place to look. It's CoreyNolan.com. I'm also at DJ Corey Nolan on Twitter. I'm not a DJ, disclaimer. That just happens to be my handle. And Yeah, I mean, I have, if you're in the Phoenix area, there's also the IGDA Phoenix. That's just igdaphx.org. And we have monthly meetups. We have a lot of game jams, which, obviously a lot of cool stuff comes out of game jams, so it's worth checking out.
Great,
Um,
great.
as for,
Oh,
oh,
sorry.
sorry.
No, no, no. Good, good.
Damn it. As for next things, I mean, I'll have my Markov chain game out there pretty soon, and then just whatever's next, it'll be up on my site. So
Great, great. Well, thank you, Corey. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
yeah, thank you very much.